Morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you for joining us for Minnesota Matters. This is our Legal and Government Relations Department's quarterly webcast. I'm Tess Rice, MBA's General Counsel. With me are Teresa Kuvas, our Senior Government Relations Manager, Tom Boswell-Healy, Associate Counsel and Compliance Consultant, and then Carrie Melismoen, our Associate Counsel. So I'm going to give an update on the FDIC lawsuit. Teresa's going to talk about some legislative issues we expect to be dealing with in the upcoming session. Tom is going to talk about cannabis banking, and Carrie's going to go over some of the resources the legal department has available for our members. So to kick it off, the MBA's lawsuit against the FDIC. Hopefully most of you are aware that MBA and Lake Community Bank sued the FDIC related to its guidance on NSF fees and UDAP. So remember when FDIC issued their Phil 40, they determined that some account disclosures didn't adequately alert customers that a bank could impose an additional NSF fee on a represented check, if that represented check also overdrew the account. So bank disclosures that were perfectly acceptable for many years and through many compliance examinations were suddenly deemed to be deceptive, according to this new FDIC position. Most troubling with that guidance was that the FDIC was essentially applying this new UDAP rule retroactively, as Phil 40 required banks to refund certain NSF fees going back 2 years, at least 2 years, in order to avoid being cited for a UDAP violation. They later retracted that retroactivity in Phil 32, but it was too late for many banks. They had already done the work and refunded the money. We had never sued a regulator before, and so we didn't take this action lightly. Joe and I discussed this issue thoroughly. We had a lot of input from Tom. We identified several ways that Phil 40 seemed flawed procedurally. First, we questioned whether the FDIC had authority to amend existing bank disclosure regulations. We don't believe that they do. Those are CFPB regs, and before that, they were Federal Reserve regs. Second, we questioned if the FDIC had authority to issue binding UDAP rules. We don't believe that they do. The FTC does and the CFPB does, but the FDIC does not. Third, even if they had authority to take those actions, we question why they failed to follow the mandatory rulemaking steps that are required by the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a federal law that requires agencies to operate in a fair and transparent way. And then finally, we questioned their enforcement approach. So we went to our board and they voted to get a legal opinion from outside counsel, which we did. And with the advice of outside counsel, the board voted to support the industry by filing this lawsuit. And fortunately, Lake Community Bank agreed to join with us on that lawsuit. So we filed that in July, and we think we have a very strong case. The FDIC responded to our complaint in September, and as we expected, they asked that our case be dismissed. And in their brief, they focused on procedural issues, including the standing of MBA and Lake Central Bank. They argued that the plaintiffs, that we lacked standing because of the withdrawal of Phil 40 kind of by Phil 42, but also they said that if they retracted this Phil 42, it wouldn't change banks' obligations to comply with the law and minimize the risks. Basically, this was always something that banks should have been avoiding, and even if that guidance is gone, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't still need to be not charging these NSF fees on represented items. They then argued we didn't have a claim on which relief could be granted because it wasn't a final agency action. Essentially, they said that it's merely guidance and doesn't give rise to legal consequences and was not intended to be binding. And of course, that's not the way Phil 40 or Phil 32 read. They said, we expect you to take action or there will be enforcement. And they also argued that it didn't require FDIC examiners to make any specific supervisory determinations. So the hearing on this motion to dismiss was originally scheduled for November, but the FDIC asked for a delay, and there's been a couple delays, and now it's been rescheduled to March 13th. So it's disappointing. Of course, you want to get to this stuff much earlier, and but that's the way the courts work. So the MBA's brief now is due on February 14th, and the FDIC has to reply to that by February 28th. All of these documents from the case are posted on our website when they're filed. So if you go to the main page of our website, there is a button there to click on to see what's going on with the lawsuit. So winning this lawsuit would have a positive effect on this specific issue, of course, but for us and our board, it's equally as important to send a message to the FDIC and the other regulators that we're watching them closely and we expect them to follow the laws and regulations that govern their operations. And I do think it's already had that impact. When we look at an issuance from the Fed on this issue, they were much more careful than the FDIC was, and they're not doing things retroactively. So I think it's had that impact, at least so far. So that's all I have for that. I am going to turn it over to Teresa to talk about what we're expecting to see in the upcoming legislative session.
Sounds great. Thank you, Tess. Just kind of wanted to touch base on a couple of things legislatively. This is the time of the year where not much is happening. So we're starting to gear up for next session. The legislative session will begin on February 12th. Next year. In the second year of the biennium, the legislators get to choose when they come back. We prefer them to come back later in the year, but regardless, they must be done by May 20th. So they'll be in from February 12th to May 20th. They definitely will not stay beyond May 20th because if you haven't seen in the news already, the state office building is going to be under repair for a small chunk of change of $730 million to fix the state office building up. But that's going to be a 2-year endeavor for the House that has to move out of their legislative offices. And they've been told that they need to be out immediately after session ends next year. So that kind of keeps them to that time frame of February 12th to May 30th or May 20th. Next week, there is a special election in the Mendota Heights area. The Democrat sitting in that 52B seat decided to resign this year for her full-time job. And so there is a seat up. The House is controlled by the Democrats, 70 to 64. The Republicans have held it once, but that was redistricting. It'd be really tough for them to win, but they're kind of focused on that one. Just kind of look at messaging because obviously 2024 is a very big election year with the Minnesota House up for re-election and hopes of getting the Republicans winning the majority to have some more divided government. So much happened in the last session that looking ahead to next session, I think a lot of people want a slower session, but that doesn't likely to be the case. Again, a lot of people are going to start looking towards the elections right away. Maybe things are a little bit slower in that they know that they have to campaign on a lot of the stuff that's passed last year and anything that's going to get passed this year. There will probably clean up stuff this year, looking at possibly some of the cannabis legislation, possibly paid family medical leave. There's the school resource officer issue. So a lot of cleanup stuff from last year. I have heard that there will be another bonding bill. The question is whether they can get Republican votes or not. That determines how it passes through the legislature. They've looked at a $1.6 billion bonding bill this upcoming session. There was for $2 billion last session. They will need to figure out what kind of supplemental budget they do. The November forecast will come out next week. They will look towards the February forecast for any changes. But right now, revenue is higher than projected. I think it's like an 8.5%, 6.5% above what was projected. So right now, the NBA spends a lot of time meeting with legislators, committee chairs, advocates, and other stakeholders at the Capitol to kind of hear what possible issues will come up next session when it comes to banking. We did have the vice chair of the House Commerce Committee here for a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things she did state that the Commerce chair wasn't as focused. And again, last year there wasn't a huge banking focus either, but the focus wasn't really on financial institutions in general, but that doesn't mean other people won't have ideas. But they did state that Representative Elkins from the Bloomington area has had a privacy bill that he's had on the books since he's introduced it probably the last 5 years, 2019 was the first time he introduced it, that he will receive a hearing. There was a informational hearing in the fall of 2021 that testify at, but the expectation is that he'll have a hearing this year. What that's going to look like, we're not quite sure. It's a consumer protection data bill that there's a lot of interest in. We've asked for a full Gramm-Leach-Bliley exemption. There is an information level exemption at the moment, but we would like to get the entity level. And it really only applies to those that have 100,000 pieces of data a year, correct, Tess? It's for the large, it really focuses on larger, and I think more
Yeah.
advertising is kind of what they're looking at, the sale of that data.
Yeah, so it
it
is
really,
banks that have that many customers' data, 100,000. So for most of our community banks, that's going to kick them out of being part of this, which is
right.
good.
So we will continue, and there's a very big interest of obviously of the business community. So we're all working on that. Right now, there's no private right of action in the bill. We've been told that he needs to keep it out. So right now, that's kind of where that one's at. I think that might also fall into, I think there'll probably be something on AI. We're looking, so to the question that just came through, any chance of exempt banks altogether? We've had lots of conversations with the author of the bill. We've stressed Colorado and Connecticut, and we've kind of gone back and forth where we thought that we were going to get a full exemption, but then conversations that he's had with other authors in other states has kind of changed his thoughts on that. So we're continuing to have the conversation with him. Our hope and we'll continue to push for that full exemption. It seems like he keeps going back and forth between various states. He's looked at Washington State, he's looked at Colorado, Connecticut, now he's looking at Oregon. So ideally, in an ideal world, this would be done at the federal level and there would be uniformity across the country instead of having the piecemeal stuff. But
don't
again,
you think it's pretty likely, Teresa, that we will have some form of entity level exemption in this bill?
entity level, I'm not quite sure. Information level, obviously, we're looking. So the question is what the wording is and if it's an entity level and how far reaching the entity level goes. Because the question is also the affiliates and kind of beyond just the financial institution. So that's kind of where
for most of our banks, I'm hopeful that we will get an exemption that would mean that they don't have to pay attention to this.
Yeah. So
we hope to get affiliates and all their activities included in this as well. But obviously our main goal is financial activities that our banks are involved in.
Yep. And the question remains what ends up happening on the Senate side. If we remember, the Senate has a 34-33 majority right now. And they've never heard this bill. They have a new author working on it this year. So we'll see what her appetite is. And we're we have some people meeting with that author coming up, and we're meeting with the Commerce Chair coming up as well. So just to kind of do a couple of other cleanup things, we might see, some cleanup on coerced debt from last year. We've had a couple people bring issues to us. And I'm not going to bring those ones up right away right now. I think those ones are still getting vetted. But we expect that, we'll see various things. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to, I think, pass it back to Tess, and then she'll pass it back to Tom to kind of talk about cannabis. But the one thing I think that's of note to everybody on the call, that if you have not seen, Max Zappia, Deputy Commissioner for Financial Institutions, has been temporarily reassigned over to the Office of Cannabis Management, which is a loss to the Commerce Department, but good for the Office of Cannabis Management. I think they needed somebody over there with regulatory background. So he will be leading their implementation chief regulatory officer. And so that's probably good for them, because I think they do need to have somebody that has some regulatory background. But we will definitely miss him, and Michael Crow will be stepping up into that role temporarily But with that, I will pass it back, but we'll know more kind of February as to what things look like for the MBA, and also kind of from some of our meetings as well. So.
Yeah, and I would say that having Max Zappia there is good for the banking industry as well, because he will be thinking about banking when he puts these regulations together, and he has received input from us on what we'd like to see in regulation, and is always open to hearing from us. So I think it's a really great connection now that we have with the Office of Cannabis Management.
And before Tess hands it over to Tom, Renee just put in the chat, Bank Day at the Capitol is March 12th next year. So registration is open, and we are working on our speakers for that day. So we'd love to see everybody.
And we're going to have it at the History Center this year, which is different, but it'll be nice and convenient, and it'll have a little bit different format. So we hope that you'll all come to that. All right, so now with no further delay, let's turn it over to Tom to talk about cannabis banking.
All right, thanks, Ted. Okay, there we go. Now I'm back. Accidentally muted myself when I was trying to put in a link there. All right, so I'm just going to put in a couple links from the states that provide helpful information for cannabis stuff. So I'm just going to do those real quick. The first one there is aimed more at the businesses. They're going to be starting their the cannabis related businesses, so it's more aimed towards them. The next one is frequently asked questions about edible products. That could be helpful. And then the last two is our, oops, I got in there. There's a product compliance link as well as testing guidance in there. But we're going to talk about with cannabis, just kind of some lessons learned from talking to other bankers in the state and kind of what they're doing, and some feedback from examiners. Kind of start off, if every bank, regardless of whether you're going to get into the cannabis banking at all, should have a formalized program that describes what they're going to do, what they're not going to do in relation to cannabis banking. So it could be part of your BSA AML policy and procedures, or it could be a separate, either that shouldn't matter too much what you do. The first thing is the bank's got to decide what exactly are you going to do in regards to cannabis banking, what types of businesses you're going to bank, what kind of businesses you're not going to bank, and then support for doing your normal customer due diligence, enhanced due diligence, all that good stuff. I did put in just a reminder that currently the only legal adult use businesses in Minnesota are tribal businesses. So you have a Red Lake, White Earth, and then Leech Lake is apparently gearing up to do their own activities soon. For the adult use marijuana, so this is above the 0.3% THC possible. Those licenses are still not expected until towards the end of 2024 at the earliest, and then they're required by early 2025 under the law, unless that changes. As Teresa said, there may be some tweaks to the law in the upcoming session. But as far as having a formalized program, I mean, you start with deciding what you're going to do. Then you need to have that in your policy, exactly what you're going to do and not do in this space. And kind of one thing that I've done in some of the documents that I've done and seen in others is use those cannabis tiers. If you looked at the space at all, you may have seen this tier 1 cannabis, tier 2, tier 3, or marijuana, however they're talking about it. But so tier 1 are just going to be any of those businesses that are engaged directly in, cannabis sales, production, all that good stuff. Tier 2 is going to be more of those businesses that directly support those tier 1 cannabis businesses. And then tier 3 are ones that really just have an ancillary connection to the cannabis marketplace. So what we can do on that is, it's just a good, helpful way to kind of put your potential customers in buckets and describe what kind of activities the bank will permit their customers to do and still have accounts, and what they won't. And that, as I said again, that's something that should be spelled out at the policy level. at the procedure level. Now, many banks still have, even with under CIP and all that good stuff, there's still a lot of procedures that are really more just unwritten practices that the bank does. It's something new like this that's going to create a lot of work. It's best to have written procedures in place so you can have, both your staff is clear, and then as a result, your customers will be clear on what you will or will not permit.
There's a question about employees, like employees of a tier 1 business. So they're your customers. So how would you define employees? She's asking, what tier would you put them in?
Yeah, that's an employee of a tier 1 business. I myself would probably be more likely to put them in a tier 2 than a tier 1, even though they're getting all their, presumably all or most of their income directly from the cannabis business. If they're not directly you're going to be the licensee, or they're just an employee. I consider that differently, but certainly you can have a difference of opinion on that. Banks can do it. It would be clear to see what you're doing. Let's see. And then obviously, if you're implementing these new written procedures, or rather just practices, important to train your staff, both existing and new. And obviously, not everybody's going to need to know all that the bank has to do related to these cannabis customers. So it's just going to be role specific. No need to inundate and give people more information than they need. But as far as the procedures, the big ones that you're going to be dealing with would be the customer due diligence and enhanced due diligence. And I kind of think of it in two ways. There's, how much do you want to know about the business? You have to figure out how much you want to know. And then also how much you want to verify or can verify about the business, sort of two sides of the same coin. Things that I've definitely seen a good idea to ask for any of these cannabis businesses, whatever sort of tier or extent of their activities. You're definitely going to look at, are they registered? They should be registered in the state, which is free, before they're selling any products. And then you want to get an idea of the extent of their cannabis activities, both the nature of their products, or if they are selling products, if it's a retail business, or if they're growing to sell to other businesses, that sort of stuff. Another thing too to really get into is whether or not they're engaged in any sort of interstate commerce, so going between in and out of the state of Minnesota, because that can certainly cause many complications for them. Another big thing to ask too about those customers that are engaged in cannabis is what sort of compliance program they have in place to make sure that they're meeting the current state requirements as far as packaging, sale location, all that sort of good stuff. Getting after checking IDs for the age requirements, what sort of testing they're doing on any products or that they're producing or selling. And one kind of interesting thing in there, the testing, one of the links I put was to a testing guidance. So you go right towards the bottom. It talks about testing the THC level and gives a plus or minus 10% tolerance. So it's, I haven't really seen good information on explaining what exactly that would mean, for a business, certainly, as to how closely they need to be in there. If it's if everything's over 9%, if that's a concern, or if it's just kind of, getting multiple testing on a product throughout different iterations of the product. But that's something to be concerned with as well. And then also updates. Right now, businesses are just required to be registered, but eventually they'll require to be licensed. So you need to know that it's good to know that your customers in that space are aware that things can change, and that how they're that they have a program in place to monitor those changes and how they're staying up to date. And hopefully they're not relying on you to stay up to date. They should be doing that on their own. And then you have always have the regular CDD kind of questions there, acting about their particular banking activities, how much currency is going in and out, ACH, wires, and perhaps any other kind of activities as well. Let's see. And then kind of things you may not necessarily want to ask, but you certainly could, or things about if they've signed up to make sure to pay the special cannabis tax, if they're, what sort of due diligence they're doing on the origin of their products, all that sort of stuff. And then kind of that, how much you want to verify, all those things you need to ask. There needs to be some sort of way to objectively verify it, or it's, if it's just asking a question from the customer and do that. So verification for the most part is, at this point, I've seen involves going to having site visits of some nature. Site visits could include just visiting the website, but also the business location, all that good stuff. But that is pretty much what I had to say on cannabis.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
We've heard anecdotally of federal regulators suggesting, well, let's say being discouraging about banks getting into cannabis banking, while on the other hand, we have the Department of Commerce encouraging it, because obviously banking is necessary for this industry to take off, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So what about that tension there?
Yeah, I think federally the tension mainly stems from banks jumping in without having a good idea or a good program in place to control any of the risks that might come up from it. So, but it's definitely something you want to go in with your eyes open and have a good plan in place. A lot of the banks may be sort of inheriting existing customers that start doing this, once the August 1st came around and said, oh yeah, now we'll do all these other different products. They're maybe not part of their main business, but they'll sell these products, or have been selling it since last year as well. But yeah, I think that's the main question that the federal examiners have, is that you're not doing enough on the front end to ensure that the bank is meeting all their responsibilities under the BSA AML.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you. I talked to someone from the Mdewakanton Sioux, and she told me that they are going to be getting into this cannabis sales as well. So
yeah, that makes sense. That'd be the tribal councils. They should be jumping on because they have an advantage. They can get into the space a year or more before anybody else.
Yeah, very true. Thank you, Tom. We'll turn it over to Carrie now.
All right, thanks, Tess. I am going to be sharing my screen, so bear with me just one moment. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
I can.
Great. So I'm just going to go over the MBA website and all the tools and resources that are on it at your disposal. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to focus mostly on the educational tools, the legal and compliance tools, and then also advocacy. So to begin with, this is the main webpage. It's minbankers.com. You're going to go to the sign-in tab up here, and this will bring you to your sign-in page. I already have everything saved for me in there, but then you'll click sign in, and that's going to bring you to, again, the main website, but you'll also have access to certain tools on the website that the general public does not have access to. So we'll start with this tab under your name. It's going to provide you with information. It'll bring you to this page, communication preferences, and you can go through this and select all the different areas that you want to receive email communications on, and also e-newsletter subscriptions. So you can pick and choose, or you can choose all of them. That would be the first thing. The next important tab in this section would be the manuals. And if you click on this one, all the manuals that you have access to will be listed here. So here we have the lending manual set, real estate lending, safe deposit box manual, record retention, ag, deposit accounts, which is probably the most important or popular one, consumer lending and commercial lending. So that is the manuals. It gives information on the most recent updates to the manuals as well. And then the next tab I would encourage you to look at would be your education tab. This will include the upcoming educational events and also your past events. And if you were to click on the view registration tab on any of these, the registration details, if there's any handouts or materials from that presentation, those would be available under this tab. In sake of time, I won't click on it. So there's a couple other things here that you can explore. I want to now go to the About tab. And we have a couple different things I want to point out here on the About tab. One would obviously be the member benefits. So if any of you have questions with regards to that information, that will be on this tab. The next one would be our committees. And if people are interested in serving on any of our committees, you can certainly reach out to us. There's a link if you are interested in serving on any of these. We have the agricultural, we have the commercial retail, we have the compliance, just a wide government relations advisory council, government relations council. So a lot of committees there. And then obviously women in banking and young bankers. So that is that tab. Also on this one, I wanted to point out, there's also a tab for group insurance, so you can take a look at that as well. The next tab I want to focus on is education and events. I'm sure many of you have gone onto this tab to sign up for upcoming webinars. If I click on that, that will give you a list of all the webinars that are coming up. And you can actually click on the link and register directly from them. Some of them are complimentary and some are paid. And then finally, on this tab, you're going to have the various conferences that are coming up, such as Leadership Development Academy, Women in Banking Conference. So that'll take you to this page, and that will be held April 11th. So I think that is it. You can explore the Education Events tab. Careers has links to Be a Banker and I Am a Banker, and the Be a Banker will take you to a separate site where you can get information, fun YouTube videos on exploring careers in banking. And then I Am a Banker focuses on promoting the banking industry in your community. The next would be the Resources tab. And there's some good stuff on this one. There is Holiday Survey, has information on when certain banks will be closed for certain holidays. And then we have a link to the YouTube channel, which has Minnesota Matters and other educational videos on it. And then the online store where you can purchase certain videos and our manuals if you don't already have those. Next would be the Communications tab, very important tab. You can find a link to the MBA news magazines and past issues, the legislative summary. And if you notice any of these that have the lock on it, that means you have to be signed in to get access to these documents and resources. We have the annual report, and then most important, we have regulatory watch bulletins, political insight bulletins, and then legal compliance bulletins. And I'll open that up. Most of you probably receive the emails for legal compliance. And if you want to go back and look at some that are archived, you can go to this tab. And then we also have media press releases and then information on community stories and champions. The next most important tab, in my opinion, but I'm biased, would be the Legal and Compliance tab. On this tab, you're going to have the Legal Department inquiries page, which you will find our email and telephone number, and then other contacts, all of our emails here. But the email here, legal@minnesotaminbankers.com, is the email that you would use if you have any legal questions or inquiries. Just want to note that, you know, you can send out unlimited emails, and then you can also call. Members are allowed up to 6 telephone calls, complimentary each year, and then after that they'll be billed at $25 per call. Also under legal and compliance, we have the compliance calendar, regional compliance meetings, another link to the manuals, Minnesota Case Watch. This is a listing of a lot of cases. I don't even know how many total. It shows here over 319. But you can do some topic searches under this and find relevant cases. And then finally, compliance tools. This is really handy. So on this, we have a link to the hemp THC retailer checklist, and I will pull up what that looks like. Actually, I don't have that one up, but we have the bank advertising rules. That one looks like this. I can bring it on over. So that's handy. And I believe that's 2 pages. There's also, sorry about that, one for secured transactions under the UCC, and then the most popular one I would say is the forgeries tool. That one is 2 pages and has a lot of good information on that. And for many of you who email me with questions, I often will refer you to that. So that's that. And I know we're kind of running over time, so I apologize. So the next tab would be the advocacy tab, and that's pretty much self-explanatory, and it has good information on that. Political insight bulletin, legislative summary again, and then information on bank day. And then this is where the FDIC lawsuit information is at, and you can find all of our documentation with regards to the lawsuit. So that is all I have, Tess. Hopefully
You
people
can also find that if you go to the main page, Carrie.
Yep.
Just scroll down below those. Well, the home page, I should say. The
Oh, the
home
homepage.
page of the website.
The about page. Oh, home.
Home.
Let's see. Hold on. I've got many things open up.
Just click on that NBA logo in the top left-hand corner.
Oh, sorry. I was going to go to sign out.
So if you scroll down there, just below those cute little videos, there's also a button for our case. Oh,
Oh, yes.
It was right under the people.
Where is it?
No, higher.
Higher. There we go.
No, one more. There we go.
Yep.
So that's just an easier way to get to the FDIC stuff. And you can see we've got the member appreciation week under there as well. A couple more plugs. There's a free sick and safe leave webinar today at 1 o'clock. And then Joe Witt, our CEO and president, he has a webcast on December 13th. He's also doing a quarterly webcast. He's going to be talking about insurance.